Hello, my dog loving friends. Anytime we talk about leadership, the idea of status comes up. And anytime we talk about status, then you know what happens? I hear it all the time. Oh, they're dominant. Oh, they're submissive. Oi. So here's the thing, dominant and submissive are labels that can give you a rough idea of your dog's reaction to a situation, but they are not in and of themselves adequate descriptions of your dog. And words have power, right? So first, I would never describe family or friends or people who are really important to me with those terms. I would never say to somebody, "Oh, my husband, he's so dominant." What? Right? Everybody would be like, it would be like a big red flag. If I said, "Oh, my husband is so submissive," you would be like, in, well, like it would have a different connotation. If, however, I described somebody that I love or even my dog as confident, persistent, intensely aware of people's emotions and intentions, that has a different feeling than dominant. If I described somebody, husband, partner, friend, dog, with easygoing, dislikes confrontation, is very agreeable, that has a different feeling than submissive. Do you see what I'm saying? And when it comes to status, status is very fluid and it is relational. It is not a descriptive personality trait that is not rigid. For instance, like relationally, I might be, I might feel like I have a lot of status, right? I'm at home, I rule the roost, I have the most status. But if like the Pope walked through my door, I would defer, by all means, Your Excellency, or the Queen or the King or a famous football player or anyone that you perceive with higher status, you would offer that deferment, right? Even though it's your home. Partially it's because they're a guest, but partially it's because of their inherent status. That person leaves, you then again get elevated back to original status because it's your home, right? It's fluid. It goes back and forth depending on who is in that moment. So, along with dominant and submissive, then here comes the other word that I literally hate, alpha. I have to be the alpha. Alpha means first. And I would encourage you to think about this in any relationship other than your dog. Would you ever say to somebody, "Oh, when it comes to my husband, I'm the alpha"? You're the first? So what you're saying is like your husband always has to cater to you, to like, what? That doesn't seem like a very balanced relationship. So when it comes to that term alpha, if I could take it out of training lexicon, I would. Because when people start talking about alpha, invariably there turns into this like litany of things, of rules, things that you can't do. Well, you can't ever let the dog go through the door first. You should never let the dog on the couch. You should never let the dog sleep with you. You should never let the dog eat before you. Like never, 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 never. And I get that some people, like, it's very rigid and it's rule based. And your relationship with your partner, with your mother, with your sister, with your friend, it's not rule based. It's relational based. Does that make sense? And so when you start instituting rules in your relationship, it takes a different connotation altogether. And I understand that when you're first starting out and you're trying to figure out how to interact and be with your dog, it's helpful to have rules, because especially if you've never done this before and you're like, I don't know. But those rules should be guidelines based on the individual, based on the situation, and quite frankly, kind of left by the wayside once your relationship starts to become deeper and richer and more intimate. I have a rule in my house. I only have a few rules in my house. One of the rules in our household is you don't go out the door unless I call you out by name. And that's not because I feel like my leadership would be usurped if you went out the door in front of me. That's not it. The reason that that is a rule in my house is it's a safety issue. My job as your leader is to proactively make sure that you're going to be safe. So I open the door, I check to make sure that everything is fine, and then I can call you out. It's about safety. It's not about alpha. It's not about I have to be first. No, I don't have to be first. Like, would I ever think, oh, Michael went out the door before me, I must be submissive to him, and vice versa? When you start to put some of these rules that come with alpha guidelines in the form of a different relationship, you start to kind of see how ridiculous they are. And yet they persist and persist and persist in our relationships with our dogs. Why? Because taking the never let them on the couch. What's not spoken is never let them on the couch, otherwise they're going to think they're the alpha. People act like these dogs are put into our lives and they just want to rule the world. They don't. They don't. Trust me, they don't. But in the absence of guidance and clear leadership and clear expectations and a clear understanding of how my world is organized, your dogs will do dog things. And sometimes y'all don't like those dog things. I understand that. So it's not that they're trying to rule the world. They're just trying to make sense of their world based on dog culture and dog laws, because you have failed to adequately communicate to them what your expectations are and how this world functions and works. You have abdicated some of your leadership. So as we continue to talk about leadership and having good leadership with your dogs, understand that dominant and submissive are rough guidelines for their reaction to certain situations. Status is very fluid and it depends on the relation. And I would encourage you to stop thinking about, I have to be alpha and my dog is dominant or submissive, and start thinking about them in certain contexts. Like they're very intense or they're very persistent. That one's a lot. Like a lot of people are like, oh, they're so stubborn. Are they stubborn or are they persistent? And the reality is sometimes when you can be stubborn, you can be persistent, and somehow that's okay. But it's not okay for your dog to be stubborn or persistent. It's not okay for your dog to say, so that's the rule, but why? 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 I don't understand. So I'm not trying to anthropomorphize your dogs. They are not humans. They have deep emotions. but they don't look at their relationships quite the same way that we do. But they do need to understand where what their status is. They do understand that status exists, right? We humans like to pretend that it doesn't, and dogs very much know that it does. So they're trying to understand their status. They don't define themselves as dominant or submissive. It's fluid, and I would encourage you to start thinking about your dogs in that manner. It's fluid based on the relationship, it's based on the context, it's based on the situation, and it can be a variety, a range of more descriptive, better descriptive words than dominant or submissive. Start looking for those shades of gray, because they're your best friends, and don't they deserve to be known at a deeper level than dominant or submissive or alpha or beta or whatever? Like, it's not always about being first. It's not always about being last. It's not even about being assertive or passive. It's a shade of gray. And here's what drives a lot of people truly crazy. Your leadership skills. And this is kind of one of those areas where a lot of people really struggle. Some people think that just because we walk upright and have opposable thumbs, that we are automatically higher in status and have higher ranking. And our dogs are like, yeah, those opposable thumbs are pretty cool, but that doesn't put you in a higher ranking situation. So that can be very frustrating, because if you have been a person who has had 2 or 3 or 4 dogs who have been very easygoing and have been, I mean, for some dogs, if you said, this is the rule, or I need you to do this, and they said, why? And you said, because I said so. And they're like, well, okay. Right? Life can be very easy. And if you have 2 or 3 or 4 dogs like this, you're like, oh, this is how I interact with dogs. And then dog number 5, you get very persistent, who is like, you say, this is how I want this. Why? 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 And suddenly you're like, my skill set doesn't match this dog. They're so dominant. There's something wrong with them. No, they're just persistent. And it frustrates us, because we're like, I thought I knew what I was doing, and now this dog is really challenging me. Each one of your dogs is an individual, just like every other sentient being in your life is an individual. Your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your friend, your coworker, your boss, all of them are individuals. And you have to build your relationship and how you react to each interaction and each situation with each one of those people individually, based on them and you and the situation. And your dogs are no different. How I communicate with Stanley is different than Walter. It's different than Annie. And if we're going to be really honest, because I am nothing but honest here with you guys, my leadership with Walter is not nearly as strong as it was with Maverick and Jasper and Stanley. And why is that? I got Walter when my dad was dying. And so all of my attention and all of my energy went to being present and of service and connected and helping my dad with that transition. And so some of the things that I would normally do with younger pups, I didn't get to do with Walter. And so I understand that Walter doesn't view me the same way that Maverick and Jasper and Stanley did. Because when Maverick, Jasper, and Stanley were all puppies and young and growing, like, I worked and I was a dog mom. When Walter came on the scene, I worked I was a dog mom and I was a daughter. And I was always a daughter, but a very present, active daughter with my dad in his end of life process. So there's always, we all have a limit on our time. We don't have, 48 hours in a day. We have 24 hours in a day. And then you take work, and then you take sleep, and then you take some of those household things. And it's easy to get diverted. But understand that your relationship isn't built on 5 minutes or 10 minutes with your animal. It is the sum of all your interactions during the day. And so if you're not fully present in how your dog perceives those actions, they can be confused. And so sometimes I think Walter is confused. That's on me to correct that relationship. So even the best of us can drop the ball in leadership sometimes. The key is picking it back up and continuing to enhance that relationship with your dog. So I hope I went over my time a little bit today. I was hoping to be a little bit faster. So I hope you have found today helpful, interesting. Think about it from your own mind. How often do you describe your dogs as dominant and submissive? Do you? Do you describe other people that way? And if you don't, I would encourage you to start thinking about different words that you would use to describe your dog. A richer understanding of who the dogs are that share your life. Until next time, may you always have a dog to love.